Hello, everyone. Helen Yu here at TDX. I'm joined by Joe Inzerillo, who is the president of Enterprise AI Technology at Salesforce. And we're going to explore the shift in enterprise AI and how Agentforce giving the new tools to developers and leaders to transform organizational productivity. Joe, thank you so much for the inspiring keynote yesterday. Let's have you introduce yourself, who you are, and what you do at Salesforce.
Well, first off, thank you for the compliment. It was a lot of fun to do the keynote. I look after kind of two facets of what we do. One is our office of the CIO, standard IT, the stuff that makes Salesforce actually run behind the scenes. But I'm also in the product organization, and I look after both Slack and Agentforce. And so that gives me a very unique perspective because I am responsible for a lot of the products that we're making that we use. And then I'm also responsible for the use of them, which gives me a unique perspective, I would say.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of responsibilities there. So thanks for what you do. But Salesforce has really redefined enterprise tech in the past, right? From cloud to social to Einstein. Why this agentic era is bigger than all of them?
Well, I mean, you mentioned the other ones, and I think all of those were definitely dislocations, modality switches of the way that people are doing things in the status quo. But this is really different. And I think it's really different because we have this new type of labor entering the market that, has never existed before. So this digital labor, these agents that are helping us are just radically different. And it's also one of those things that even though we made them, we're still trying to figure out how to use them in the most effective way. And the rate of change is just so fast. It's really incredible. I mean, things that we thought were impossible 6 months ago are now like, well, of course, why aren't you doing that?
Yeah, it's a fascinating time, right? The agentic AI or agentic enterprise architecture you shared yesterday resonated with me, right? I work with a lot of CIOs and CDOs where AI strategies fail when the contexts are siloed or governance are afterthoughts or sometimes orchestrations are manual. So tell us how this four-layer architecture Salesforce solving that problem.
Yeah, I think, for us, we're really fortunate in that a lot of the things that we built up over time just become more relevant. But I think ultimately the context layer, which is sort of the bottom layer of that cake, is super important. And not only do we have Data Cloud, which we've been working on for several years, but we bought Informatica, and they're part of the family now. And, there's a bunch of just rich, what do you do as a company? How does your customer interact with you? All that context is sitting there at that layer. And it's just important for your business, but it's actually even more important for agents. Because humans know kind of what your company does. An agent doesn't until you tell it. And then the system of work on top of it is really a lot of the processes and the things that run the mechanics of the business. And so people love Service Cloud, Sales Cloud, Marketing Cloud, things like that sit at that level. But we have so many different products for so many different levels right there. And then on top of it, you have the system of agency, which is really where these agentic experiences get built, these agents working on your behalf to try to actually accomplish things that in some cases humans could never do, like reason across massive amounts of data that no human being could do, but an agent can do. And then on top of it, you have engagement. And that's where Slack sits. We announced some really exciting stuff with React. We did all sorts of really cool demos of different rich context showing up in a bunch of different surfaces. And that layer of engagement is really important because ultimately the way to make agents really valuable is to have humans and agents working together. If the agents are in a silo and the humans are in a silo, you just don't get as much done.
Well, the best way to prove the architecture is using that yourself, right? Salesforce is the best use case for agentic AI. So tell us a little bit about your insider view. What are the most exciting use cases you're seeing?
Well, I think last year, one of the things that we talked about at Dreamforce was really our engagement agent. And this notion of most companies of any scale have a lot more customer leads coming in than they have people to work them. And so we were no different. About 30% of the leads that came in were worked by a human from day one, but about 70% got automated email journeys and things like that. But with the engagement agent, you can now have an agent talk to every single person one-on-one with all the context of that customer or potential customer and have a real conversation. So I think that's massive. And the thing to me about that is, even though we talked about it last year, it's the scale we're going at. So we took a system last year, and now we're going to be over an order of a magnitude more throughput through that exact same system because it just keeps getting better and better, and the humans learn how to use it better. So I think that's super exciting. But I think, right now I'm buzzing about, Salesforce Headless 360, which is really this like next generation of thinking about Salesforce differently. It's not this like, to your point, cloud. Sometimes, it's like a rock band that has a really good hit. So like inventing SaaS means we must be a SaaS company. But the truth is, like, yes, we are a SaaS company. We are also an AI company. And I think the headless version of this is really showing people how they can use the goodness that we have, all this business logic, those 4 layers, but code it in the tool of their choice, deploy it in the experience of their choice. Just really open it up. And like I said, I think that sometimes people don't realize how far we are, but hopefully after yesterday's keynote and the things that we're talking about today, people can see like we have real capabilities that are super important for enterprises to take advantage of.
Well, being a lifetime Salesforce user, I can tell you I walked away from the keynote excited and energized yesterday. But let's say 100% of employees are using Agent, right? And then the Slack becomes a front door for them. And tell us how that looks like day to day.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've always tried to do with whatever system is you try to go where the humans are. Like anytime you have to change behavior, especially for like Salesforce, look, we have 83,000 employees.
Wow.
So to change behavior for a worldwide company, multiple languages, different time zones, and say, okay, everybody go over here. It's a tough thing to do. So we want to be where the work is already being done. And for us, Slack is that. Slack, for most companies that use Slack, it's where work gets done. It's why when you look at the who's who of AI companies, these next generation companies with all the tools they have are still massive Slack customers because that's where people go. And so it makes sense for us to bring agents into that environment, like as opposed to saying, hey, go talk to this agent over here. No, just talk to it in Slack. Talk to it with your colleagues in Slack. Talk to Slackbot by itself. Slackbot is your personal assistant. So, I don't know the gender, he, she, they, is hanging out with you there and providing all the things that you need. So Slackbot, I think, is a really important part of that experience as well. But it just makes sense because that's where the conversation's having, and these are conversational agents for the most part.
That experience is only possible when developers are building something different, right? The way they do are different today. As an app developer back in the days, we used to design, we build, and then we test and deploy by sprint.
Yeah.
And now it's a whole new world, right? Tell us a little bit more how it's like to be a developer in the new agentic era. What does it mean that you actually made a statement yesterday during the keynote? What does it mean that they have to ask new kind of questions as a developer?
No, I think that's right. I say things like, agents are not software, and everybody's like, oh my God, agents are not software. And it's like, yeah, they're not. They're built from software, but they're not software. And I think anytime you get these probabilistic systems in AI, they're not going to respond the same way that a deterministic system is. So it would be weird if all the stuff that we did for determinism was totally fit for purpose for AI. That would be strange because it's such a different type of experience.
Yeah.
So we really have to add things. It's not that stuff is not useful. It's that we have to add additional steps. And that's where we get into this crossover where the agent itself is digital labor. And so if you think about a human employee in your company, you wouldn't hire an intern and then never talk to them again. Right? Every day, especially if they were an intern, you'd really have to spend some time with them to get them up to speed. And as they progress throughout their career, they're probably a bit more autonomous. Agents are not humans. I don't want to anthropomorphize them, but that step of mentoring is critical to get the agents to get better and better and better. And in that respect, you don't really mentor code. You get it to a point where you're happy with it, and then you sort of leave it and go do some other stuff. And then if you're not happy with it anymore, you go back and remake it. But these agents need care and feeding. They need to be treated more like digital labor and not like a piece of software.
You better say thank you and please, right?
Well, just in case the machine overloads ever take over, it's probably a good plan.
You actually made a bunch of announcements this week about the new tools for app and agent dev lifecycle. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of things that are close to my heart because some of these techniques are actually very common in direct-to-consumer, environments. Because, when I was working on Disney Plus, when I was CTO for Disney Streaming, we would come up with an idea, but like you didn't really know if it was a good idea.
Yeah.
We thought it was a good idea. We did a bunch of testing, but you don't know. And then you put it out there and people to vote with their eyeballs in that case, right? They either like the feature or they don't like the feature. So the way that you make improvements is you have to test. You have to do like small incremental changes, new features, things like that, and then just see what happens, take that data and continue to repeat that process. That's exactly what you have to do with an agent. So once you get the agent up and running and it's in production, you need to do these, test, tune, and repeat cycles to make the agent better. And so we announced the sort of multivariant testing side of it, A/B testing, which I think is super, super important. But it's also the observational side of it. Like, what insights can you get with the agent? If it's a piece of deterministic code and it's doing some math and you're like, okay, 1 + 1 = 2, I can observe that. It's pretty easy. I could just observe the 2. But in the case of an agent where you have these deep reasoning cycles and they're really trying to think about it, it's not just the result, which is critically important. It's also how it got there. Because if it's wrong, you need to know why it got it wrong. And is it data that it's missing? Is it too much data? Is it an instruction that you gave it? There's all sorts of reasons that could take an agent from a good experience to a bad experience. And you don't want to make those changes wholesale. So those two things, in addition to the rest of the product development lifecycle that you're used to, really turn it into an agentic development lifecycle so that you can continue to improve these agents. And, the technology is amazing.
That really requires a new set of skill set, right? Think about software development. It used to be more predictable with just the zeros and ones. Now, they actually reasons, right? They not only reason, they take action, they adapt. And then, so what kind of new skill set that requires? And then how is agent blazers are going to bridge that gap?
Yeah, I think part of it is a personal journey, and part of it's tooling and education and things like that we can provide. And so we're definitely going to do we showed a bunch of the technology that we're doing. We're doing a bunch of stuff with Trailhead. We're really trying to give people the opportunity to learn. It is also a personal decision at some level where you have to decide to embrace the technology. But I haven't met a single person in my entire career at Salesforce and, in the last couple of years where you say, hey, did you use that agent or did you use that AI?
Yeah.
And they're like, nah, AI, it's terrible. I'm not going to use it. Everybody who uses it loves it. And, they may not have every experience is great, but I've never met anybody that's like, you know what, I want to go back to the old days. Because, what you're building may require some new skills and is this sort of probabilistic side of it that some software engineers may find slightly disconcerting. The tools that you're using to build those experiences also have all of that flexibility. And so it's just one of those things where you take the good with the bad, and like the lack of sort of certainty, especially initially when you're developing an agent, is a very small price to pay for the acceleration and the complexity that you can now build with your partner, the AI, to get things done. And I think the Salesforce Headless 360 is a great example of like we're trying to encourage that, where you don't just have to come to our playground to do it. You could use Claude Code, you could use Codex, and all of that stuff is available to you. So it's sort of like, you vibe the way you want to vibe, we're going to be there and we're going to support you.
I love that so much, right? Because you're really meeting the customers where they are rather than force them upon your technology. So it's more customer-centric focus is a long game you're playing here.
Yeah.
But the role of CIO has evolved, right? And I work with a lot of them. And to me, they're shifting to be a technology leader or technology visionary to an orchestrator to an educator. They have to make sure they rally up the entire business leader support.
Right.
What's your view on the evolution of CIO role?
No, I think that's right. I mean, I think, this is where I think for a CIO, it's got to be super exciting. And I hope they see the opportunity in this, because if you think about it, most CIOs, both from a reporting structure and just from who they talk to talk to the finance team. So it's about cost control more than anything else, right? You want to do technology, you want to provide tools, but at what cost, ROI? And it's always been viewed as a cost center.
Yeah.
We're now in a different era. So I actually talk to our commercial team and our human resources team more than I talk to the finance folks. I do talk to the finance folks. They're great partners. But I'm now talking to so much more of the company on a daily basis to try to help them take advantage of this technology. But with that comes the ability to actually make growth happen inside the company. And I don't think that CIOs generally have felt very empowered historically to drive growth. But now you can. Because if you take a sales team and you make that team 30% more efficient because you've provided all this agentic support, that's real top line growth, not just working at the bottom line finance.
That actually forced the alignment, cross-functional alignment among the executive team, regardless you're a technical leader or business leader.
Yeah.
That actually leads to my last question here. And I believe every company will shift from being a SaaS company to an IaaS company. That's agentic enterprise. And then, so what's your view for a company who decide to wait for another year to act?
Yeah, I think that's a tough choice. Like, if you really are waiting for this to stabilize, I think it's going to be pretty frothy. And, it's tough because these dislocations in the market make it hard because the best practices are not necessarily today. They're going to emerge in retrospect. So a couple of years from now, we'll look back and say, okay, these folks had it right. This was the right way of doing it. But that's one of the things that we take very seriously and why we want to be a trusted partner for folks. We want to go and be in that journey with the CIO, with the rest of the business, not just the sales folks, not just everybody, but the whole business in totality to try to get there. Because it's critically important, I think, you go with a partner. I like to call it swim buddy. You don't go swimming in the ocean by yourself. You have a swim buddy. We're your swim buddy. That's what we want it to be. Like, we'd like to be your swim buddy. But I think that's so important for CIOs, especially those that are struggling with where to get started, is like, we can help. We've done this enough, not just with ourselves, but with other customers. But if you're not doing it, your competition surely is. And the rate of acceleration you get when you make this agentic transition is so big that it's a massive disadvantage if you're not taking advantage of it. So I just don't think waiting a year is an option. In a year, you might not have the option anymore because so many people are moving so fast. And so we definitely feel that this is driving, good, honest competition. But you have to have the right tools to be in that competition, and we want to provide them for you and help you get there.
Well, you better have a sense of urgency and take action now, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Joe.
Personally, company-wide, everybody.
Absolutely.
This is the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, thank you so much for your insider view on how Agentforce transformation looks like in practice. And keep up with the innovation. I look forward to checking in with you in a few months at Dreamforce.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for having me.